Okay, it's 11:45, and it's time for our next session, in which we will focus on the sub-theme of transition and transformation. Okay, for those of you who are joining us on Zoom and Facebook Live, once again, welcome to Bangkok, Thailand. We are having the first AICT IATC conference in Southeast Asia. And this conference is co-organized by the Department of Dramatic Arts, Faculty of Arts, Chulalongkorn University, and International Association of Theatre Critics, Thailand Center, with a kind support from the Office of Contemporary Art and Culture, Ministry of Culture of Thailand, and Contemporary Arts and Culture Industry Promotion Trade Association of Thailand, or CAPT, as well as the Embassy of France in Thailand. Okay, so for this session, we have Ketipum Nantanukun as your moderator.
Thank you so much, Professor Pavit. And as Pavit mentioned, this session is about transition and transformation. We have two very interesting papers. The first one by Christina Rusiski, From the Dictatorship to Democracy, Stories of Transition. And Christina is here ready for us, so please.
Thank you. Now, the context. Romania. Almost 35 years of transition between the communist dictatorship and the democratic regime. After 89 performances dedicated to a period whose societal inclinations or even flaws we can reasonably assume that have remained unhealed to this day, were the exception rather the rule. I would have expected those who make theatre thirsty for freedom, as by definition artists are, to try to explain, analyze, heal them through the power of art. I would advance to possible explanations for their lack of interest. The first would be the roller coaster of changes in the new reality they had to face. It is not recent history that captures their interest, but the present captures all their efforts to adapt. Another, more plausible explanation lies in the need to bury the memories, the grief they had experienced, the desire to distance themselves from a past perceived in varying degrees from cloudy to traumatic. Now I put some images from a comedy which I shall refer to soften a bit the drama. Nowadays, those who don't live through those times do not understand that the communist regime, under the direct guidance of the Soviet Union, whose successor today is Russia, meant 3 F's for Romanians: famine, freeze, fear. Freeze and famine from the regime's obsession to invest the megalomaniac projects and pay the country debts. Fear stemmed from the sentencing of any dissident to long prison terms and the establishment of a regime of terror based on the cancelling of individual freedoms and squealing. It is said that a third of the population had been coerced to write informative notes about colleagues, neighbors, and friends. Political police agents controlled the letters of civilians. Travel abroad, especially to the West, was prohibited for most people. After the communist regime, although no one felt individually guilty, the recent past placed a collective guilt on everyone. But guilty people from a legal point of view, there were none. The old power structures endured, a law of lustration never arose again, and the report of the Presidential Commission for the Analysis of the Communist Dictatorship in Romania intended to incriminate the methods that allowed the abuses, crimes, murders of the dictatorship, flagrant violations of human rights, and the role of some political figures in the maintenance and operation of the totalitarian communist system in Romania, was only drafted almost 2 decades after the fall of the regime, to immediately become an object of contestation and derision set up by some political parties. All this only added to the confusion. But what do you do with the older generations who lived such times, who have members in their family sentenced to more than a few years of prison? People who are forced to shake hands with their old squealers, either proven or just suspected, to work in the same place, to still breathe the air of the same office, or of the same theater. An irreversibly stained air, heavy with the shadow of mud from a sick society. What do they do when they have to share space with their casters? It is delineated. Do I hate them to death? Does he forgive them and try to come to terms with living together? Each case left its own mark. Taken together, the cases converge into the moral stigma of the entire society. And now I shall speak about 3 performances about this issue. Transgenerational stigmas and social distortions can last for decades. Transylvanian Tale refers to them. A political police agent investigates a writer and then sends him to jail when his daughter is only 2 years. He seems to be guilty of having written a children's story. The political police agent beat up his wife and forced her to divorce him. What are the chances that the victim forgives the torturer? Will he be able to live together with him? Even if, rationally speaking, he forgives him, will he be able to forget? If community spirit is so difficult to build in nowadays Romania, this is most certainly due to the mistrust inherited from communism. Not all of them were informers by conviction, but due to blackmail, torture, or threats to their families. The realities displayed in Transylvanian Tale are even more complicated, given the tensions between Romanians and Hungarians. It all happens in Târgu Mureș, city with a population of 50% Hungarian and 50% Romanian. There, only a small dose of manipulation is enough for interethnic conflict to break out. No matter how improbable the story itself might seem, it is actually the history of the director's own family. He went back 3 generations, depicting the historical truth and mental patterns deriving from each of them. The first generation is hollowed by the terror inflicted upon the people by the first decades of communism. Hardly 1 meter away from the audience, the writer speaks about the humiliations that every dignified human being had to endure in communism. In this particular case, a man who wrote stories for children, his only fault being the fact that he was dreaming of a free country. His face during the investigation, the look in his eyes, the reactions to each and every twist that this investigation done by the book is taking. First intimidation, then friendliness and understanding from the part of the political police officer, followed by insults and swear words and ending with violence, so that it all leads to the creation of yet another informer in the whole historical scheme of things. cannot but awaken the sympathy of the audience. The show does not judge, anathemize, or try to solve things. It just analyzes the complexity of human relationships among the fiendish barricades of the system. Paradoxically, life itself will harmonize them, as love will bring together those two sides and nationalities. The son of the Romanian political police officer is in love with the daughter of the Hungarian dissident. How can children deal with the issues of their affective heritage? Suffering because of paternal disapproval, as well as because of the coldness and harshness of the father, all through her childhood years, the girl has to choose between love and respect for the unhappy father, who proves to be relentless when it comes to her marriage option. Another show, directed by the novelist Boltish Otilo, ended with the following lines. Tell me it wasn't you to write this. Please, tell me you're not the one with the coat named the Janissary. An actor speaks to his colleague director, obviously about an informative note. They have been working together for years and years. Their creation cannot be separated. The murky atmosphere revolves around the relationships of the dysfunctional family, where each member takes on and carries with them the burden and mistakes of the others. The result can only be spinning in your own circle of guilt and self-loathing. The youngest member, teenage, emotionally mutilated girl, summarizes the history of those close to her. My grandmother hanged herself. My father did not die. My mother was raped by a drunken diplomat. That's how I came out. My grandfather put my father in prison for 10 years. My mom doesn't like taking out the trash. That's about it. I don't understand what's the big deal. The family drama reveals the entire violence of the communist regime with denunciation and tortures, with heavy prison sentences due to the old prosecutor who incriminates on command but does not have the courage to file a complaint against the Russian who raped his wife. In this hazy reality, executioner and victim, in turn executioner for other victims, remain forever bound. But not all approaches to the communist reality in the theater were registered under the sign of the tragic. Some, as Leonida Gem's session, were viewed from a comical perspective without the tonality blurring the seriousness of the situation. This was an adaptation after a comedy written in the 19th century by the national playwright Ion Luca Caragiale, with two characters. An uneducated retired person who makes an ludicrous political analysis, and his wife who listens to him like God. The director Tompa Gabor enriched the play with an addition of communist taste. Characters in black leather clothes, with insane blown twigs and black sunglasses, a perfect mix of political police guard, communist nomenclaturist, and modern-day rocker jazzman silently invades the stage, all serious and looking like great performers, as if the fate of universal music rests on their shoulders. With remote control in hand, just as ceremoniously another character enters like a mobster leaning on a cape. He presses a button and the universe reacts. A trompe-l'oeil goes up all around with identical blocks of flats and photocopied balconies. The big shot brings his lectern with a microphone as the powerful of the day and, excited, reads the tracking file of the actor who plays the main character. We plunge into derision, gossip, aggression, pleasure in doing harm unnecessarily, and stupidity. A lot of stupidity, which in communism, as in post-communism, will leave room for manipulation. Today, we have a new transition dictated by the evolution of technology, by AI, in which new concepts like post-truth, fake news, deepfake serve manipulation of all kinds. The pace is frenetic. We quickly swallow greedily unchewed information written by authors who most often want to lead us in one direction or another, to manipulate us with more or less subtlety. Theoretically, we know that it is best to apply the personal filter, pass them through the sieve of reason, judge and analyze them, make our own correlations. But most of the time there is no time for that. In the era of post-truth or the power of influence held by social media, all kinds of theories creep into our minds, exposing us to dozens of ways of disinformation, not aligned to the interests of different political or ideological groups. When the thesis becomes more important than the effort to decipher the work honestly, censorship has its way open. This is the theme of The Whisperers, a sensory experience lived by the viewer the hard way, capable of awakening their attention and senses. What the artist's mission will look like in the future. In the context of the cancel culture movement, when classical texts are banned, the director Ionuț Karas imagines a performative installation in which the actors try to save important texts, some that testified to the author's humanistic visions of the future, the artist's statements, or the convictions for which the writers had to suffer during their lives. In the new censorship, so that the literature of the world is not lost, the performers, with conspiratorial faces covered with thick white makeup, learn by heart a collection of about 80 texts that they say in their ear. It is not surprising that the symbol of such a world becomes the funnel through which truths are transmitted in whispers in great secrecy. A network of conspiratorial funnels is created first between the performers, then between themselves and the audience. One funnel to the actor's mouth, the other to the spectator's ear. Then the dynamic changes. Two actors simultaneously whisper different texts into the ears of a spectator. Then each of the audience will be assaulted in turn by a group of actors. The flurry of information, the agglomeration of knowledge that invades the mind, is felt literally on the body through the hundreds of funnels, so it seems, although there are only a few, glued to the viewer's body. The actors invade the audience with a flood of text. On the inside, we are whole libraries. One of the quotes will sound. Post-humanism, post-truth, post-apocalypse, surrounded by wars, with the threat of the next world scourge, which the politicians refer to daily, the transition now looks like a powder keg. In fact, we are in a perpetual transition. Perhaps its most desirable form now would be the return from post-truth to truth, to a society in which freedom is incompatible with ideological censorship and art opens up infinite possibilities of knowledge. Thank you, and please let me offer an old book of mine, the only one I have in English with a lot of trans in it. And please help yourself after the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina, for your talk, and I really appreciate how clear you've shown us the powerful role of theater in Romania has played and continue to play in historical issues and political issues. Thank you so much. And before we move to the next speaker, for those who are on Facebook and on Zoom, if you have any question that want to ask the speaker, please feel free to drop in the chat, also on Facebook as well, and in the chat room on Zoom. I will monitor all these questions when we do the discussion at the end. Okay, so our next speaker for this session, I would like to invite Hanna Stechkova. She's going to present the paper entitled Transformation of Theatrical Language, a shift from literary to non-literary theater due to ideological censorship. Please.
Thank you. If we can share the PowerPoint, please.
Can we have Hannah's PowerPoint on screen, please?
Because here it is visible, so if it could be visible also. So.
Okay. I think yes.
Yeah, we are there. So, censorship and intervention of the emperors or kings is not unknown in the theater history. It has been present already in the ancient civilizations. Actors of mime, but also, for example, of Atalana comedy, fell into disfavor of emperors by their indiscriminate honesty. And it was especially the mime's gestures that proved more eloquent than words. The actors of Atalana indulged in freedom of speech, and they did not shy away from political references. For example, during the Nero's reign, a certain actor of the Atalana illustrated the first verse of Hail Father, Hail Mother, with eloquent gestures suggesting drinking and swimming, which the audience, knowing perfectly well that Nero had poisoned Claudius and that his mother nearly drowned in the mother's attack, naturally interpreted in the only possible way. It is so timeless, while the government tried to control all forms of cultural productions. Artists always found creative ways to push boundaries, often using nonverbal forms of theater, including physical theater, to communicate subversive messages. American theorist Barry Rolfe mentioned a parallel to the Commedia dell'arte in her study. When the 16th century Italian players in France were forbidden to use text, they substituted song. When song was censored, they used print signs or offstage narration. And when words were forbidden, they used pantomime. This paper discusses censorship of theater during the Cold War in Czechoslovakia. I conducted the research on non-text-based theater such as pantomime, physical theater, and performance in the period after the Second World War until the Velvet Revolution. In this period, playwrights, directors, and actors had to adhere to party-approved themes, often promoting socialist realism, which glorified the working class and portrayed communism in a positive light. Works that were critical of the regime or did not conform to the ideology were censored or banned. The Polish mime and founder of the Wrocław Pantomime Theatre, Henryk Tomaszewski, at the time of the tightly drawn Iron Curtain, said, "Today the word has lost its value. We no longer believe in words." As the country was under communist rules, usually the semi-illegal artists were creating their own form of performance art, such as mime etudes, happenings, body art, land art, situationism, para-theatrical events in atypical environments, and later on site-specific performances in listural spaces. With the constant threat of police surveillance, censorship and arrest, it was not surprising that most of the protest art were related to the body. An artist could perform anywhere, without materials or studio, and the work left no traces. The companies and individual artists were developed their own manifestations of genres, and they were exploring various meanings in diverse practices dependent on socio-political climate. Although shackled by censorship and tightened by ideological supervision, they found countless ways to express themselves on the current problems, if only by playing decent and honest people. 1950s. After the Second World War, especially after the communist putsch in Czechoslovakia in 1948, the so-called Ždanov aesthetics began to be applied in a theater. This was a set of dogmatic rules that dictated the model of the organization of cultural life and prescribed obligatory themes such as the anti-fascist struggle, the Soviet Revolution, or, for example, the collectivization of the village, etc. The officially recognized mainstream followed the Soviet model. Stalin's brutal campaign against intellectual art was also manifested in Czechoslovak practice by the reduction of acceptable theater forms, de-Russification, and censorship. In the 1950s, theater was seen as a useful tool to promote the socialist agenda and the ideas of Marxism and Leninism. Despite this, the first post-war full-scale pantomime called Circus of Hope was staged as a comedy experiment with political overtones by the Prague Theatre Satyr. The theatre production was created at the time when Marcel Marceau was beginning his work at the Théâtre de Poche in Paris. Interestingly, the premiere of Circus of Hope was attended by the director Bertolt Brecht himself. Czech theatre theorist Ladislava Petišková summarized that theatre critics admired the work of the Circus of Hope. Circus of Hope was highly praised as an innovative work for its content and genre until October 1948, after which there was complete silence surrounding the existence of this production. The communist dictatorship quickly stopped the promising restart of the pantomime in Czechoslovakia, calling it as a decadent and intellectual art and ideologically inconvenient. The censors, on the other hand, did not have any problem with classical etudes of romantic pantomime following the model of Jean-Gaspard de Bureau. Thanks to this, the movement training was preserved in schools in Prague, thanks to teacher Lauret Hrdinová, who trained Ladislav Fialka at the Dance Conservatory. He and his classmates For the first time in 1954, then in 1956, with a graduation series of pantomime etudes, continued and performed their ballet pantomime. Despite the enforcement of strict ideological and political criteria, he founded the group aimed to create a modern Czech pantomime in 1958, and very soon this company became part of the theater on the Balustrade in Prague. Because due to the isolation from the contemporary Western theater of that time, these artists drew on ballet, modern dance, and the bureau traditions. The influence of Marcel Marceau, Etienne Decroux, or Jean-Louis Barrault was very sporadic due to the low possibility of traveling abroad in the 1950s. This changed only with the liberation of the 1960s, and most notably in 1969 and 1971, when two editions of the International Festival of Pantomime in Prague was held. 1960s. The semi-illegal or semi-professional companies separated from the mainstream were more diverse and generally based on enthusiasm. They arose spontaneously in moments of political dislocation, especially in the late 60s, but also later in response to a period of increased censorship and political restrictions during the next period of normalization. Often the desire for own group or unified group by the same ideology evolved from an inner need to define themselves against the totalitarian regime through the different teams and forms of self-presentation. While Mom, Ladislav Fialka, was cultivating Y pantomime, Boris Hybner met Ctibor Turba, and the second generation of mime was born. Günther Simon, in the German magazine Theater Heute, described Ctibor Turba and Boris Hybner as the Black Beatles of Prague. The so-called Beat generation of mime was inspired by silent cinema, slapstick comedy, absurd theater, and clownery. Czech Ctibor Turba exploded on the mime horizon, first with the Alfred Jarry Pantomime Company in 1966, then in his solo surrealist performance Turba Tacet from 1970. His play varied the ways of human solitude. In the production consisting of 5 tableaux and connected by film projections in that time, the author explored the relational variety of Beckettian lonely existence to inanimate objects. Already in the Roman theatre, Petronius claimed that fear is best overcome by laughter. In the performance, in addition to the harsh poetics and black humor, nudity also appeared, and this detail, the nude body, shocking in its time, probably contributed to the official banning of the company in 1972 without giving a reason. This meant that any work critical of the government, exploring themes of individualism or questioning communist principles, was considered subversive and was strictly censored. Even they didn't tell a word. The 60s shortly gave hope to get out of entertainment propaganda sea of spiritual mystery. Mime Boris Hybner commented on the period. It's true that pantomime was at a high level. It was in a way a peculiarity of the previous regime, its censorship apparatus. Artists were looking for different ways and forms to express themselves. Pantomime impressed a large part of the youth. Its opinion, as we know, oscillated between extreme noise and extreme silence, and that is what pantomime is. With the suppression of the briefly acquired freedom, a cultural sociological underground was formed all the more intensively, whose philosophy was to live better, but not in the certainty of material security, but in truth, sincerity. The theater director and theoretician Nina Vangeli commented on this analogy. Movement appeared to us then in the excess of false words as something that can be used to speak truthfully, or rather that cannot be lied about. The Prague Spring in the 1960s, culminating in the August occupation, was a period of a liberal revival movement. One of the reverberations of this temporary freedom, or a momentary loosening of the regime censorship, was the aforementioned two international pantomime festivals. The first edition of the International Mime Festival took place in Prague 14th till 28th of September 1969, but it was supposed to take place in 1968. Due to the mentioned occupation on 21st of August in 1968, the realization was forced to be postponed. American terrorist Barry Rolfe, who visited the festival along the other international guests, immediately noticed in the performances a deep subtext commenting on the political situation in the country. In her report published in 1970, she wrote, "Several electric moments on stage were direct reflections of the current political situation." One such moment occurred during Marcel Marceau's concert. His sketch, "The Cage," is a parable of a man imprisoned in a cage who breaks out of it, only to find that his prison had been enclosed in a still larger one. The Czech audience gave the artist 44 cartons at the end of the program. The edition of the festival in 1971 was already marked by censorship and surveillance by Soviet observers. And this was a pantomime that didn't speak a word. This confirms how the controllers were irritated by all the hidden details between the gestures. 1970s. Semi-official companies have been asking aloud for the meaning of art at the time. Does it mean to be an artist, not to create out of one's own convictions? The decision not to betray oneself meant temporarily throw off the established system of values and certainties, to abandon the conventional personality, not to dwell on ordinary professionalism, and to build a personality that is authentic, and more to blend personal and artistic essence, to engage it in a particular human situation, and to make this process openly public. Many theater practitioners, including directors, writers, and actors, began to practice self-censorship to avoid punishment. Some worked within the confines of the system to maintain their careers, while others secretly pushed boundaries through subtle subversive techniques. This period saw the rise of underground theater. The performances were often given in private spaces, far away from the watchful eyes of the state. And the body became a central medium of expression rather than spoken language. At the beginning of 70s, on the initiative of František Hrdlička, the White Theatre was founded with the aim of finding a space of inner freedom and to play any dramatic situation of a general human nature. White Theatre consisted of people who lived the experiment and thus created it following the example of the laboratory work of Jerzy Grotowski. And in 1966, Theatre Quidam, formed by students in Brno, was formed, and they explored creativity with an emphasis on the instinctive side of man. Their performances were shocking, often depicting nudity, and very often involving the audience. As already mentioned with Tibor Turba's production, this unprecedented aesthetic irritated the censors, and the Quidam Theatre, like many others, closed down in 1972. These innovative theater companies gradually disappeared from the theatrical map due to the political ban on their activities, such as Alfred Jarry's Pantomime, Quidam Theatre, White Theatre, and the others. Others were also affected by the emigration of their members or by their disintegration due to the work commitments in the civilian life of actors. Just for the end to compare, in terms of constitutional progressive drama theatres, the open-minded spirit of the theatre behind the gate. The company, which was founded in 1965 by the director Otomar Krejča, finished her last season in 1972. And despite the support of the global theatre community, they had to close down by the censors, by the government. Even the printed program of Brooks' phenomenal production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, considered without exaggeration to be the groundbreaking production of the 20th century, stated that its tour is dedicated in memoriam to the theatre behind the gate in Prague, closed by official decision in 1972. And also the reaction at the time with regard to the ideological situation in Czechoslovakia led to director of this piece, Peter Brook, being banned from entering the country. Censorship in Czechoslovak theatre during Cold War was a tool of control used by the Communist Party to suppress dissent and promote the official state ideology. It created an environment where mostly semi-illegal or illegal theatre became a space for subtle resistance, often relying on allegory, absurdism, hidden meanings, and on the body. This approach was effective in circumventing censorship because physical performances could evoke emotional and political responses without the need for words that could be directly banned or censored. The fall of communism in 1989 allowed for the liberation of the arts, but the legacy of censorship left a lasting impact on Czech theatre and its role in social and political change. A strong tradition of pantomime and movement theatre has already remained. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Next, I would like to invite our lead discussant for this session, Professor Lee Ha-won from South Korea.
Okay. Thank you for emotional speech from both of you. This is a session where we have to really respect all the artists who had to overcome all the difficulties and hardships because of politics. And I was wondering why Pawit put me in this session. He told me, you must be appropriate for this session. I don't know why, but maybe in our home country, we had a very severe dictatorship in late 19th century. So when I was a university student, everybody was against the government and the dictatorship, and we experimented some theater form based upon our traditional traditional theater, and also we could symbolize our situation and our protest against the dictatorship through our forms of theater. And then there was Spring of Soul, which was really a very hard moment where one dictator was killed and another dictator came up to the power, and he just killed so many people in southern city of Gwangju. And at that moment, well, we could not go on with our own way of theater, just symbolizing instead of directly speaking. at the moment, many of my fellow students, they just give up their own way of theater and just went onto the street and speak directly as many other university students and citizens. And that moment, many of my colleagues were arrested and they had to give up their studies and also went to the army. Many things like that happened. And also my parents wanted that you have to stop theater. You have to just quit all those kind of movement and just get back to your desk and study instead of just go onto the street or just go onto the stage. So from that moment, I had to focus anyway to survive, to be a professor, teacher, and just to be independent from my family. Then I had to read books, and I had to go to the resource of literature or words, text. And then I finally specialized in French classical drama genre scene. And then I became professor and independent, and things changed and politics become better and better in Korea. But what I'm thinking now is the theater in these days still needs language or text or letters, or do they still need non-literary means, as you already said? Because Antoine Artaud in 1930s, he already talked that in the age of representation, we have to go back to the presentation of our body or just instant ways of communication and give up the language or text as the only ways of theater. But it was early 19th century, and at that time with Artaud, there was nothing to do with politics or dictatorship, but he thought maybe modern age and modern technology and everything could be more tyrannic, more political than any real dictatorship, and he wanted to have the resource to more present way of theater. And then that influenced a lot to Korean theater goers as well. So 1980, 1990, we could see many physical theaters and many students just wanted to practice their body training and everything. And well, so it's the period after we have some democratism recovered. At the moment, we had resource to our physical theater. Yeah. So I was just thinking of all those history around me, and while listening to your dialogue, your presentation, Christina from Romania, you talked about 4 very powerful instances after you got your freedom, but you still have all the trace stigma from the dictatorship and the broken family, broken hearts and everything. To recover that, you had some 4 excellent examples of theater. And what you concluded for your paper, you said, in this world we are confronting again some threat of political world, and then maybe we need to just to stick to truth when we still have freedom, and we have to open up possibility of knowledge through art. Then for truth, I'm wondering if you are thinking of text or literature, truth. So I'm wondering, do you think truth is the only way or the most powerful way to get to the truth? The language must be the most powerful way to reach it. I just want to know your opinion. And also, Hannah, you told us, for a very hard period of dictatorship, they had to go to non-literary ways of theater to avoid censorship and everything. So at the time, non-literary methods could be the only way to avoid all those kind of things. And now I was thinking about this. Last year I visited Brno, Czech. So I saw all the free people, you can do whatever, you can speak whatever. From what I saw and from what I see at the Manhattan Theater and all the theaters, we had all kinds of theater freely. And then now, after you get your freedom, do you still think non-literary forms is valid? Or do you agree with Christina's idea that we are fearing another threat, so we may have to go to language to tell the truth? Well, just the main point is the theater can reach the truth by which means. The means of theater as language or means of theater as non-literary science, all those are valid. Can we really reach to the truth? So theater is the question I could get from your presentation. And also I would like to open the discussion to the participants in this hall.
Thank you so much. Shall we start from Christina? Your response on the conclusion of your paper regarding the truth of the theater. Yep, please.
In fact, I was pleading to return from the post-truth of nowadays with its manipulation and when the words lost their meaning and everybody chew the words with nonsenses, and they are only means for manipulation and disinformation and so on in our news. The theater has a lot of means to get to the truth, to the truth, because since the beginning of the theater, we arrived at truth. So there are a lot. I meant only of 3 stories where the stress was on plot and not the theatrical meanings. They were very, very simple. I think 2 or 3 of them were independent projects with low budget, so very simple. And but the story was so important, and the meaning was so important. And these were only 3 examples, but there are a lot of other means and theatrical techniques to present the truth or to get the audience closer to the truth. I have one question for Hannah. In fact, could you please give us an example of a subversive pantomime theater which disturbed the communist regime?
Yeah, as I mentioned it, thank you. Then I will answer your question. Yes, as I was talking about the pantomime festival, already Marcel Marceau showed the etude which was interpreted with the submissive message, but I guess Marceau didn't think even about before he put that etude into the program. That there was a man who is like leaving one cage to revealing that he is in a much bigger cage. And all that festival in 1969 was read through the subversive messages and interpreted by the current critics. Just for example, the scene from the piece called it Button by Ladislav Fialka. One scene was that people are just passing through the corridor, the wall and back and just like nonsense movement. But people immediately interpreted it as a way of socialist movement, of masses, manipulation. So many topics became very aware, very open to people who even didn't look for the intellectual theater, but it just came to their minds that time. And there are so many examples of that kind of theater, and I will just follow your question that the valuability of the theater is not only in a literary or non-literary genres. It could be everywhere if we touch the truth. And the truth was mentioned by both of us. And we have to face nowadays into new challenges like manipulation or technologies or frustration or post-COVID time. And the body language, the non-verbal, non-literary theater is very strong and powerful to express even emotions or situations, plot and meaning. The body is transposing the space. The body can lead us to magic world of the theater. And the body talk is a language which is absolutely global and universal, as we could also see yesterday or everywhere around the world.
Thank you. Now I think it's some 3 minutes, maybe for maybe a couple of questions. If anybody want to ask the speakers, please feel free to. Yes, please.
Thank you. I have one question for Hannah about the censorship of the performative art, and I feel very related because it also happened in Thailand even these days with this issue of censorship. What I wonder is about the technical issue of the censorship that you mentioned in your presentation. I just wonder whether is there any law written clearly what and how to control what you can do, what the theater practitioner can do, cannot do during that time, or everything was de facto. They just go to the performance and then put them in jail. And to compare theater with film, they're quite different. We also have a film censorship, but for film, I think it's more practical because you have a print and you can show it to the censorship board to get approval for the distribution. But like the pantomime, it's happened everywhere, all the time. So how can they monitor and control this? So yes, I wonder about this technical issue on the censorship.
Yes, we had several laws which were changing from the 50s. So as I called like the Zhdan of aesthetics, it was already confirmed by law. And in the 70s there was again another theater law which defined the censorship. It means, now generally not for very long, when you wrote a play, you had to send it to censors. They would read it before you even want to stage, or if you are already in the process, they would read it in a researching the context and really submersive messages. So they could find in Hamlet that it's a political play and they will just ban it. They will just say, no, it's prohibited to stage Hamlet because It's very political to these days. So, and then if you were approved to do the process, then you had a jury. You had to perform once in front of one or two censorship people, the controllers, who said, okay, you can go for the opening night or not. You stop. And also we had in the past the stories when you showed your work and immediately your company was cancelled. You were prohibited to stage, like Václav Martinec with the company Křesadlo, because, and they did the movement theater in 80%. Few words just said on stage, and it was just enough to ban the company. So we had the laws who really strictly set the rules, what could be staged and how, what should be the aesthetics. And if we talk about pantomime, of course, they were pushing the boundaries, they were showing the etudes, but the theater is also improvisation. So if you improvised too much, there was immediately the answer of the censorship. And also, you never knew who is in the audience, even you have been approved. So you had so many reprises, and then you improvised or you answered the question for the audience like in an interactive way. And you could go in a jail immediately. There was a story, for example, just very shortly, from street theater. There was a man actor who were performing, playing with the audience. It was a summer festival, I guess. And he was just told, there is a soldier and he has to go to Kreml. Okay, let's he bring a cake called kremrolada. And there was a joke of words, just 2 words. Then he was playing with puppets and miming. And he got 1.5 years. He was sentenced for jail. So there was a law, there was censorship, there were controllers, there were so many hidden police inside.
Yes, document, control everything. Yes. To compare in Thailand, we don't have a particular law for theater, but performers can be put into jail by other law, like obscenity or more severe law. I won't mention it in Thailand. Yes, but we have theater practitioner who went to jail, not from the theater law, but other law.
Yeah, Václav Havel is, I think, is the biggest example of going to jail, the dramatician Václav Havel. And also, if there was a sentence like to go in jail, you could choose jail or immigration.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And let's come to the end of this session on transition and transformation. And I hope that everybody enjoy and we continue to have this conversation regarding this theater and politics and all these issues after or during lunch. And I turn the stage back to Pawit, please.
Thank you very much, Ketipum. And Ketipum will present his paper later this afternoon. Okay, we are now off the air. Okay, so for now, couple of announcements. Lunch is at the theater foyer on the 6th floor, and all of you who are here now are invited. Please join us. Yes, please. I'll invite anybody whom you like to invite. Yeah, we have lunch prepared for everyone. And the workshop will start at 1:30. Yes, in the same room you were yesterday. The French group will be on the 7th floor. Okay, the one with the yeah. And then the English group will be in the same room you were yesterday. Yes, and your workshop this afternoon will continue until 4:30. Okay. As well as our conference. Yeah. Okay. Please enjoy your lunch. Okay. And then please come back at 2 p.m. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.